Join us for a walk along the former Derbyshire and Staffordshire extension of the Great Northern Railway. Opened in 1878 and indicated by red lines on these maps, the Derbyshire and Staffordshire extension of the Great Northern Railway was built by the GNR to gain access to coal resources in the area to the north and west of Nottingham. The Midland Railway had obstructed the GNR in its attempts to secure a share of the lucrative business of transporting coal from the area, and in frustration the GNR built the line. The following images show those financially viable resources in transit. On the 27th of September 1966 and nearly at the end for steam, Class 8F48510, labours up to the top of the 1 in 100 climb from Derby, having just emerged from the 464-yard Mickleover tunnel with a coal train. Another coal train heading towards Eggington, pictured from Station Road Bridge at Mickleover. Photographed in 1951, this coal train is seen leaving the western portal of Mickleover Tunnel. With the complete closure of the line, the whole of the route between Mackworth and Eggington, with a diversion to avoid Mickleover Tunnel, has been converted into a cycle path, the Mickleover Trail. Today it is a cycle track and nature path adopted by Sustrans. Our walk commences at Heage Lane, Etwall, and finishes at Mickleover, some 3 miles distant. The Mickleover and Etwall Gas Light and Coke Company and sidings were located adjacent to the railway bridge in Heage Lane. The Derby Gas Act of 1906 allowed for the acquisition of the Mickleover and Etwall Gas Company. However, the works were closed down by 1932. Today there appears to be no sign of the works or the sidings that served it. Nevertheless, the works manager's house remains to the present day. Heage Lane Bridge had the designator 117. Here we can clearly see the bridge plaque during the period the track was used for testing. Here we see a present-day photograph, and an earlier photo, showing 20227 plus unidentified sister loco at Heage Lane, during BR days. Another photograph at Heage Lane. As with the previous image, I believe these to be taken during the process of track lifting. The line originally formed part of the Great Northern Railway's Derbyshire extension cross-country route from Grantham to Stafford. The line climbed from Friargate, Derby at 1 in 100 and the line entered a deep cutting leading to the 464-yard Mickleover Tunnel. Reaching the summit at Mickleover Station and, being curved, it presented a particular challenge to train drivers. From Mickleover the line drops through Etwall to Eggington Junction. The Friargate line, as it's often referred to locally, was a back line, and ran from Nottingham, Victoria, over the famous Beneley Viaduct, and having crossed the ornate Friargate Bridge, it reached Derby. It then continued onwards to Eggington where a double junction was necessary to cross the Stoke to Derby track. Crossing the River Dove it joined the North Staffordshire Railway, which it left at Uttoxeter to journey on to Stafford. Although most of the line was closed to passenger traffic in December 1939, only workmen's trains had actually run between April 1928 and October 1939. Nonetheless, the line continued to see excursion traffic and the last such train left Derby Friargate on 5 September 1964. The line finally closed throughout to passenger traffic on 7 September of that year. Freight remained, but eventually Friargate goods closed on 4 September 1967. Etwall Station saw excursions until 1962. The following images show Etwall Station and the Skeggy specials there in the early 1960s. Black 544920, calls at Etwall with the last Skeggy special. In this image we see Etwall station in June of 1957 with a stopper for Llandudno. In the second photograph one of Collex K3's powers through Etwall on an excursion to Llandudno and Rhyl. On 4 May 1968, the Stevenson Locomotive Society organised a farewell tour of the GNR lines in Derbyshire, Nottinghamshire and the Leen Valley area. The first photograph shows the SLS tour passing Mickleover, whilst in the second photo the train is seen heading for Mickleover Tunnel. At the same time of line closure to both passenger and freight, BR had recently opened the Railway Technical Centre at Derby, where they were investigating a number of new areas of research including what was later to become known as Automatic Train Protection, ATP, and in so doing in the late 60s British Railways developed 2 test tracks near its main technical headquarters in Derby. The first track was the high-speed Old Dalby line which was specifically developed for the testing of the experimental advanced passenger train. For its second track, the line between Eggington Junction and Friargate was acquired by the Train Control Group of the BR Research Division as an experimental test track. It was partially signalled. The Mickleover test track was a much smaller and low-key line than Old Dalby. Nevertheless, it saw a great deal of on-track test work over the years. Known officially as the Eggington Junction to Mickleover test track, the Research and Development Division's second test line was a 5¼ mile section of the down line, of the former G.N.R. Derbyshire extension. Several brick-built bridges remain along the track. Here we're approaching Badges Bridge. At Mickleover, Etwall and Eggington there remain the original road bridges, still in use by traffic today. The remaining bridges allow farm access, whilst some carry footpaths. Approximately 4 miles of the former upline was also retained for purposes ancillary to test movements, and was designated the long siding. In addition to the normal mileposts, boards showing 100 meters markings in yellow on a black background were fixed to the sleeper ends on the left-hand side of the track in the down direction. The test track was equipped with facilities to introduce track defects for testing purposes. Test running at speeds greater than 65 miles per hour for vehicles authorized to travel at such speeds was only permitted on the authority of the Chief Civil Engineer. There was a permanent speed restriction of 15 miles per hour between Eggington Junction and accommodation level crossing number 27. There were 6 accommodation level crossings on the test line, which imposed certain restrictions on line speed limits. These crossings were located at 149 miles 800 yards, 149 miles 1,520 yards, 150 miles 239 yards, 150 miles 571 yards, 151 miles 275 yards and 153 miles 365 yards. The speed of all propelled movements was reduced to 5 miles per hour over the accommodation crossings unless the gates had been padlocked. Hauled movements over these crossings at speeds greater than 45 miles per hour could only be permitted when the gates were padlocked. Prior to padlocking the crossing gates, the Research and Development Division communicated with the entitled users of the crossings, that is to say, the local farmers. And if they gave notice of their intention to use the crossing, a hand signalman was appointed at the gate. During the walk we found several reminders of the test track including sleepers, ballast and signals, along with 1 or 2 signs. A run-round loop was provided at both the Eggington and Mickleover ends of the line. There was an additional siding at Mickleover approximately 200 meters long, with platform-level loading available at the buffer stop end. The portion of test track at the 148 3/4 mile post on the Mickleover side of the end of staff section upboard, and the loops and sidings at Mickleover and the long siding were not considered to be running lines and were subject to a 10 mph speed limit. All movements on these sidings were under the control of the person in charge of Mickleover ground frame. This person may have been a guard, movements inspector or qualified member of the Research and Development Division staff who may have also been the officer in charge of tests. Although initially based at the Friargate site in Derby, once the line had been cut back, the BR test group moved to the station yard at Mickleover, where a workshop and various sidings were constructed. There was also a small ground frame giving access to the test line. Office accommodation was provided in portakabins. The permanent building at the Mickleover depot incorporated a laboratory, mess room, toilet facilities and control office, the latter having a security officer and telephone switchboard, and a 24/7 security service was also provided. The two sidings led into a two-road train shed which was approximately 50 meters long. The shed was fitted with mains outlets to a maximum capacity of 60 amp 3-phase and also contained charging plant for the battery railcar but had no paved floor. Mickleover Depot was the normal base for the train control project test vehicles, Hermes, and Mercury, the two-car battery railcar and a Clayton locomotive. The Mickleover test track was not subject to the dramatic changes that occurred at BR's other track, at Old Dalby. However, in 1973, the eastern end of the trackbed had been earmarked for the new A38 trunk road. As previously mentioned, after approximately 18 months of use the line was cut back to Mickleover from Friargate, and in its final form it ran between Eggington Junction and Mickleover, a distance of approximately 6 miles, with a maximum line speed of 65 miles per hour. Its proximity to Derby was a great advantage, but its low line speed limited the types of tests which were carried out. Although the line was well used during its time as a test track, it succumbed to the cutbacks within the research division and finally to the A516 Etwall bypass and the A50. The building of the A516 Etwall bypass, which was a feeder to the A50, M1 and M6 link road, came at the time when the BR Research Department was rationalizing its assets and spelled the end for the test track. In July 1990 the line was closed. In July 2001, it was reported that the local bus company were interested in installing an express busway on the first 2 miles of the track between Friargate and Mackworth, but nothing came of this. Mickleover railway station, which served the village of Mickleover, was opened by the Great Northern Railway in 1878. Today it is converted into 2 private dwellings. The station was originally provided with substantial brick buildings, a 2-story station master's house and single-story offices on the platforms. Radbourne was in the same parish, albeit some 2 miles distant, and the station was labelled Mickleover for Radbourne. The station remained open until the 3rd of February 1964, closing when goods traffic finally ceased. The station at Mickleover and nearby Great Northern Pub are accessed from the aptly named Station Road. The station was about 1 mile from the village centre. I'm indebted to Dave Coxon and the many contributors to his webpage for allowing use of several archive images. Much of the test history was also obtained from the same source. For a fascinating and in-depth look at the test tracks of Old Dalby and Mickleover, please visit his webpage. If you have comments, please leave word in the comments section.